Okay, so I wanted just to take you through my process on creating this character. Now, this is the Mother Scarecrow for Whispers in the Corn. I'm using Character Creator for my entire pipeline. I start in here and then I bring it into ZBrush and I do a lot of sculpting in here. And then just to give you kind of the overview, I take this sculpt and I export that and a bunch of normal maps and bring it into Substance Painter, where I paint this up, and then I export these textures and I bring it back into Character Creator to get this. So to show you kind of what it looks like to begin with, you would have something like that. And then these clothes are something that I have made in something called Marvelous Designer. This is what the clothing looks like in this program. And I'm kind of showing you just the finished product because I had already made this character. And so I just want to give you an overview of my process in creating her and kind of my thought process in creating her as well. So she is the mother on the farm and she is cursed. And so her face is sort of like this stitched together burlap. And here we could test some animations that she has. So you can see that I got her looking around, and we could also test some walking animations. These are just the stock animations that Character Creator gives you. I haven't brought in any of my own special animations yet, but these are good just to get in there and see the skinning, see how the cloth is laying on her and everything like that. And then what I like about this is you could always go to the A pose like this. And if you want to change her appearance, you have all these sliders in here that Character Creator gives you, but you can only go so far with that. What I do is I get to a certain point and then take it into ZBrush. And there's this is a separate sculpting program. And this is kind of the end result. And just to kind of show you what this is like, we're at the top sort of subdivision here. And I do a lot with, I guess I could just, I'm not going to save this. So I'm in symmetry right now. And you could see how this is changing the topology. I guess not topology is the right word, but the form of the face itself. Now, what I typically do is work on this a lot at this level, this subdivision level, and get this as good as I can using the move tool. So I do a lot of this to kind of get the proportions that I like, what's going on with the lips, the eyes, and I do a lot where I zoom way out and I might say, you know what, she's got way too big of a forehead, or maybe I need to elongate her face in general. I could do that. I think it's important to zoom in and out and see the model at different views all the time. And when you do that, you kind of see what works and what doesn't. You want to stay nimble in the viewports. You don't want to look at any one view for too long, because if you do, you're just going to have one perspective on it. It's important to have your perspective looking at it from all sides as much as possible, so that you, especially at this stage, at this subdivision level, so that you get your proportions right. So then from here, you would take it up a notch to the next subdivision level. And see here, you get some more polygons to work with. And at this stage, I hit the wrong button there, sorry. At this stage, you get a few more polygons to work with, as you can see here, just to show you the comparison. There's this, there's only that many polys versus that. It's essentially double. And you really want to work at it at each subdivision level. So it's kind of like you model the same character multiple times. What I like to do is jump into this brush, which is kind of like this fine line, as you can see. I'm going to undo that, obviously. But I had this thought where she would have these sunken in eyes, kind of like a skull, and nose. So from afar, she kind of has that classic scarecrow feel, but then it's all sort of stitched together. So, and I like that idea of the mouth that is cut at the edges and kind of goes on a little bit like the Joker, I guess. But in this case, sewn together like burlap. So it doesn't look like much at this subdivision level, but as you can see, I just kind of start getting a rough form of what it looks like. And once I have all that working and getting all of these kind of broader details in at this stage, I would increase and go to sub D3 and see now you can start seeing some really interesting details start to emerge. And here's where I would really kind of sort of draw out where I decide to put some of these folds, some creases, that sort of thing. In this case, where do the laugh lines lie? Where do I really want to punch up some of these creases around the lips? Where do I really want to put those forehead creases? And I don't really spend a lot of time at sub D3. I spend more time at 4. I kind of skip 3 a little bit, because what I find is once I get to 4, I now have the kind of detail necessary to put in those smaller details that I need. And I could start doing some masking and reverse that, and then do these like pits. That's how I did all of these creases, except what I did was I got really in there. I'm just trying to, there we go. So in these cases, to get these little details, I mean, I just went really far in there like that. And and here I am making a mask. So I'm painting a mask on there. And then what you could do is you could kind of erase back the mask to get some even smaller shape. And then you could invert the mask, and then you have your detailed shape. And then what I do is I just move those polygons or pixels in, and once I undo my mask, there we go, we have that detail in there. And at that stage, I also turned off symmetry. You see how as I'm working this, I have symmetry on. Well, there's a way to turn that off. You could just come into here, turn off symmetry, and so now I could just work on one side of the model versus the other. So I could do a mask on one side and make it different from the other. And I thought that was important. I think that adds a lot of visual interest to the character. So this character broke symmetry pretty early on. It still has a lot of similar motifs going on here with the eyes being kind of this sunken in, and the mouth having this kind of ripped open from the corners feel. And it also has this eyebrow sort of rip going on here, but they're different. They're different in their own way. And if I were to do them the same, if I were to have kept symmetry on, it would have looked really unbelievable in a not cool way. It would have cheapened the character. I think it would have made it not seem as real. And I'm going for realism on this project. I want to suspend disbelief as much as possible. And so then I take it to sub D5. In a typical AAA production, I think you would go beyond that, maybe 6, 7, and get extreme fine detail. But I'm going pretty fast. This is an independent solo production. So I'm just doing all the work myself. I'm doing all the programming, all the art, all the music. And so I don't have a lot of time. So I want to get as much bang for the buck as possible, sort of that 80-20 rule. They say that you get 80% of the work done in 20% of the time, and then the last 20% of the work, that final polish, takes you 80% of the time. So I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule. And I kind of take everything as much as I can to that 80%. And to me, this is 80%. I could easily, and this, by the way, this took me about, I don't know, I would say a little bit more than one day, one solid work day to do this. Now, in a AAA environment I could see spending a lot longer. There's a lot of work I could do to really kind of clean this up and start putting in more fine details and pores and stitches and stuff like that. But I think this is as far as I'm going to take it, at least for now. What I like about this workflow is it's non-destructive, meaning once I get this in the engine and I see how she's looking, I could always come back and change it. So from here, I get a normal map and I export it and I bring it over to Substance, which is what I'm using to do the texturing. Now, the way this worked was she starts like this, okay? She's got a normal map right there. And without the normal, let's see here, what's the normal look like? Is it this one? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna turn that off so you can see what it looks like. Without the normal, she just looks like that, right? Which is what she looks like here in Character Creator if we were to turn that off. So you could see that the normal map does a lot. In fact, if we go to the material here, go to the scene, the body, head, here's the texture right here. If I were to take that down all the way, this is showing what the normal map is doing. And if I take the normal map all the way down, that's what it's like there. So if I take this all the way down here, this is what I have left. So again, if I just bring in texture map, it kind of looks like Halloween paint on the face. But what really brings the magic is that normal map. I mean, bam, right? Here it is at 200%. So I'm kind of overdriving it. The correct amount is 100%. Sometimes it does make sense to overdrive it, but I'd like to keep it at the correct amount until I get it in engine and I see it through the actual camera that the player would see it. So anyway, going back into Substance. All right. So I brought the character in and I need to assign the maps. I put the normal map on and I have an ambient occlusion map. And the ambient occlusion is giving a little bit of self kind of shadowing. You can see it a little bit in here, but it's subtle. It's a subtle effect, which is fine. First thing I do is just get an overall procedural texture. Now, these are called smart materials inside of Substance. And this actually has lots of parts to it. So I could show you what those parts look like. There's a basic material right here, and we could determine how shiny it is, like that. And I settled on this. And we could also change the color. And I gotta say, I really like the hue saturation value sliders in this program. Really well done. I like working in this way as opposed to RGB. It really, when you're working with color theory, working in hue saturation and value really is the best way to go, because you typically want all of your colors in your piece to have the same level of saturation, and then maybe having an accent color that has much more. So keeping track of your saturation is important. And then your value too, to kind of separate that out. So you're not looking at something that has a low value and high saturation. Anyway, it's a really good way to kind of organize your color into these three categories. I don't want to get into a whole color theory thing. I think we could talk about that in a separate video, but this is the base color that I landed on. And this is like just a slight kind of material, like a little bump to kind of go on him, or go on her rather. Another subtle effect, this gunk, you could kind of see it a little bit more here. And there's adjustments that you could do for these. I believe in here, it's right here. Let's see here, we have balance. So we could change the balance of that and change the contrast. Now I've muted this down, it's only 30%. I could change it way higher. And that's kind of the art of it too, is, you know, playing with these sliders and finding the right amount. So it's a little bit technical and a little bit artistic and craftsmanship. A plaque just adds a little bit of darkness around the eyes. This dirt and damage is the real magic here. And probably the one I spent the most time tweaking, because it just adds so much and it's easy to overdo it, right? So there it is, all dirt, and there is no dirt, so how much is too much? Finding the right balance. You can see how you could get carried away with it. So I'm going to back everything off to get to where I left it. So there it was with that. And then I kind of turned that off because I'm like, you know what? I just want to sort of paint. And so in here, you just, come in here and you just start painting. And here you have a brush, and I'm painting, looks like I'm painting white, but you could paint like this, or you could paint directly on the model. And you could also paint with symmetry. And so in this case, I just sort of painted all in there. Did the same thing with darken. So this right here, I spent a lot of time on. This was a lot of going in and painting all these details. There's a lot of this, a lot of getting in here and finding these creases. Looks like I may have missed one up here and right there. And I could bring those out a little bit if I wanted to. And so the process would kind of look like this. I would just paint like that and erase back a little bit. I could see it there. Oh, you know what? I have symmetry on, and I don't want that because I'm pretty sure that this doesn't exist on the other side. Yeah, it kind of does, but not in the exact same place. So I'm gonna undo all that, take symmetry off. Here we go. And let's just put it back in. And isn't undo just the best? Could you imagine not having an undo button or an undo history? Would I be dating myself if I said I remember when they started adding undo to programs? Because I do. The first paint programs didn't have undo. You painted and that was it. I think like Deluxe Paint, I don't think it had an undo, if I remember right. Like you would just start over. You would just make a new file and you would just try not to screw up. Try not to mess up your work. And that was it. It was pretty tough. That was our walking to school uphill both ways in the snow and for a long time undo was kind of unreliable. You didn't know if undo was going to work. I guess to a degree that's still an issue, right? There's always kind of an end to the undos. Like how many undos do I get? How many times do you want to keep undoing, like 10, 20, 30 undos because you want to back out that far, and then it just stops undoing and you're like, no, I wanted to get further with my undos. Or maybe it's just me, but I don't know. I think there are those times where you made a mistake. You didn't save your files well and you need to go back to a earlier state. Maybe the program doesn't have autosave and you need to go back to something. So kind of not getting this right. Let's see here. Oh, you know what? So yeah, it's because I didn't have my Wacom set up right. And you know what else? That's better, much better. That's kind of what I like about this is you could move the whole canvas around to follow your stroke. I remember having a Cintiq, a Wacom Cintiq, which is the style of Wacom where you're drawing directly on the screen. And they're expensive. They're nice. I liked it. I'm going to do this again here. Because you could draw directly on the pixel that you want. There wasn't this disconnect of drawing on a tablet and having it draw on the screen and having to kind of adjust, if you know what I mean. And there was something about the Cintiq where I just kind of felt like I was hunched over the thing all the time. Because ultimately you couldn't move the paper around. I think that was the other thing too, is when you're drawing, you kind of do this whole idea of imagine this is a piece of paper and you're drawing. You do this. You if you want to draw a straight line, you don't try to force your hand to draw a straight line from every direction. Human anatomy is going to have your wrist draw a line from here to here. This is kind of the natural thing. So why try to, like, this is very unnatural for me. So just move the paper so that you draw the line naturally. Well, the problem with something like a Cintiq is I always felt like I had to contort into some weird positions while I was working. to get those straight lines. Whereas something like this, like just this kind of interface invention of being able to just rotate around like that solves it. I like it. I really adapted to that while working on this character. I've never really used this before working on this character, so it was fun. Anyway, so I would take the character to sort of that phase, and she's looking pretty cool. Something else that I do, just as an FYI, is I do play around with the lighting setup in here, and I do change the light rig, and what I found that I find is a good neutral thing is I think just one of these in here, one of these studio lighting setups. So there's no color in the light, and all the color is what I'm putting down on the paint. And something else that I do is the field of view. See, here's a really kind of high field of view, and that's something that you would see a lot in a video game. Is these high fields of views, because it sort of pushes the 3D aspect of it, makes it look more dimensional, but it's not very realistic. It's not filmic or cinematic. Going much flatter is actually far more cinematic. It's having a long lens. So once you get something like this, which is a field of view of only 20, so a much more narrow and longer lens, it's far more natural to our vision. And this is kind of how we view the world, through our eyes. And that's kind of the way I like to model and paint is in this sort of setup. And I do kind of play around with the exposure and everything. I like to have it look as much as a final render as possible as I'm working, as opposed to having something like house lights. There are people that just want to kind of have it super bright so they make sure they're not missing any pixels or anything like that. And there is value in that. I do agree, but I don't know. I think in this case, I just moved the light around and I just wanted to see it in more of a cinematic feel. Maybe because I'm making a horror game and I just want to make sure it remains kind of scary. So then let's see here. I had this kind of contouring layer. I just added a lot of, I'm going to switch from my Wacom pen back to my mouse here. And then with everything all together, we get that. And I was pretty happy with that. And by the way, the texturing didn't take long at all. Admittedly, I'm still learning Substance Designer. Traditionally, I would just use Photoshop and just paint inside of that, do my texturing inside of that, and then view the model inside of 3D Studio Max. So this is a brand new workflow, but it's been nice. It's been really nice. So once you have something like this, I would take the textures, export them all, and then head over to Character Creator, where, as you saw before, the character would look like this. And oh, by the way, she wouldn't have any of that. She would just be like this. And let's see here, the head. I like to bring in the normal map first. That was really working. And then bring in the texture. And then what I really like about Character Creator is you can test the motion. So right here, I could just have an emote run and I could play it. And this is with what's nice about this is with the highest subdivision of ZBrush, with those normal maps and textures brought through Substance and back into the final model, which is rigged and skinned inside of Character Creator. And this could go into Unity or Unreal, whatever I wanted to do. And I could also test the voice. And I do want these characters to speak to the player in Whispers in the Corn. So I'm looking at the positions of the teeth and making sure that all works. I want the eyes to look correct and everything like that too. So, and from here, I added the hair, and then I had to make the clothing. So for the clothing, I brought her into this, and she didn't have any of this yet. I'm gonna hide all of that the way that I started. Let's see here if I could open an old one. And that's kind of the process, right? Like you're always learning these tools. I've been doing this for a long time, over 20 years. And just when you are getting comfortable with your programs, you're learning Blender, or you've learned 3D Studio Max or Maya, new features come online, new game engines are released, new programs like this Marvelous Designer come out. And it's important to be constantly evaluating them and trying them out and seeing if they're good, seeing if you should adopt them. And Designer, this one is one of those that I wasn't sure. I'm like, I could use 3D Studio Max to do clothing because it does have a garment system in it, and I like that. But once I really started using this, it was like, oh, this is really nice. And the fact that you could just pull on the fabric like this in real time and adjust it, and just all the tools and the pinning and stuff, I just really liked it. So there I was with just a little bit more progress. And let me go a little further, collar, and you could see I found a way to get a little bit more kind of ruffle there, some ruffle in there. Yeah, it's fun. You kind of really do feel like a fashion designer. You're doing a lot of kind of cutting and sewing, and I just kind of kept going. And this is a program, again, that I'm not really an expert in. I'm just kind of winging it, to be perfectly honest with you. And I'm putting in buttons, and I got layers of cloth, multiple layers. It turned out pretty good. I think I did this whole thing in a day. Not too shabby. Then from here, I exported that and brought it into Substance again for texturing. And I'll show you what that looks like. Going here. Let's see here. Oh, you know what? I think I just had it in. Okay, so here's the clothing textured. Now, I didn't really go in here too much and do any special texturing. I really just used the smart materials. So for the dress down here, there's really just this old burlap and a little bit of wear and tear on top of that. And for the dress top, I got this nice, try to make it look like fabric, old fabric. It's got this dust settling, dirtied it up, and added some kind of gunk or maybe blood or something just to horror it up a little bit. And then did a little bit of work on the belt, not too much. It's kind of a weak point. I don't like the edging on that. Kind of definitely could use some more. I could go further on this. I could add like an alpha map on the edges and get these like ruffles on those edges. I could bring in the buttons and get those all textured. And then I really want to put like an alpha map on the bottom of this, make it look frayed, maybe some holes in here. But again, that 80-20 rule, I want to just kind of take it to a certain point and not get too carried away. So from here, take that, I export it, bring it into Character Creator, put her in the alpha pose, or A pose rather, and then brought in the clothing. And Character Creator does just an amazing job with skinning, with assigning all the vertices of this model. If we were to look at the mesh of this, all of these vertexes need to be weighted to the rig that drives this character. And it's usually somebody's full-time job just to do that on an assembly line. In this case, it was like a button click, and there was a couple of cleanup points, and I love the workflow of just being able to just go in here and say, okay, let's have her do some poses and then run an animation and have her test. And what's funny is here she is, a kind of this cursed ghost scarecrow, and she's doing these fashion designer poses. I think it's great. I'm gonna have to make this like a short in and of itself. I think this is great. So anyway, I hope you liked this. This is me putting together the Mother Scarecrow. From here, she would go and get exported, be put into Unity. I'm doing Whispers in the Corn inside of Unity using HDRP. But currently I am focusing on building all of the Scarecrow characters for the project. So she is one of them, and I'll show you the other ones here too.